All right, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Pastor Dennis, Pastor Lori, for hosting this event. It is so absolutely important. And thank you to every member of Experience Church who's here, as well as all of our community members. It's just so important to be engaged and informed on the issues. So my job today is to kind of widen the aperture a little bit, to broaden your scope. Because as Representative Chambers mentioned, they didn't just pass police reform in a virtual session with very little public scrutiny. They also passed prison reform and a number of other things in a virtual session with very little public scrutiny. So I want to go over a couple of those and just kind of widen the aperture so that you have a good feel for the entire field that we're looking at today. And I'll start off with, because law enforcement, police is the first link in the chain, right? And then from there, where does it go? It goes to the prosecutors. And then from there, it goes to the Department of Corrections. So I'm going to hit a little bit on each one of those. So a couple of years ago, I started doing a little bit of research, and I found out that a lot of prosecutors weren't prosecuting certain crimes. I heard a rumor. So I did a little bit of research. And, prosecutors at the county level, they're all elected. Right? So they have to be accountable to you. But how do you know if your prosecutor, your elected prosecutor, is doing a good job or not? Is there any web page you can go that says I have a good one or a bad one? There's really not. So for me, for example, for elected representatives, legislators, you can go to my web page and you can look at every bill that I've written, every bill that I've signed my name to. You can look at how I voted on every single bill, and you can hold me accountable. There's no such thing that exists like that for elected prosecutors. So I did a little bit of research, and what I found was just astounding. In 2007, the Seattle city attorney, the prosecutor, they refused to prosecute 17% of all referrals given to them from law enforcement. 17%. I get that. Maybe some paperwork was in error, there wasn't enough evidence, or something happened, so 17%. Fast forward to 2017, a decade later, that jumped up to almost 50%. Almost 50% in 2017. Just in 2019 in King County, the King County prosecutor, they refused to prosecute 41% of all felony referrals given to them from law enforcement. Compare that to Spokane. That same year, Spokane prosecutor refused to prosecute only 6%. So if we get to that, I'm left with the conclusion that we have a lot of prosecutors that are enacting their own political will and determining which laws they are going to enforce and which laws they are not going to enforce. So, we've got to get after that. We've got to keep an eye on our elected prosecutors because they work for you and they need to be transparent. The next thing that we've done is we've made it a whole lot easier through a series of bills to be a criminal. And I'll just highlight one for you here today, maybe a couple. I'll highlight two from last session. I'll highlight two. Senate Bill 5164. So this is a bill that reduces a penalty for crime. So what this one did specifically is it removed robbery 2 from the 3 strikes law. Okay, so if you were sentenced to life in prison because of the 3 strikes, and one of the strikes was robbery 2, it no longer counts. So you're out of that now. So we just passed that. That may sound okay to a lot of folks, but whenever you peel the onion back a little bit, what you find is that robbery 2 is often pled down from a higher level offense, right? So it's likely already been pled down a little bit, and now they're let off. Senate Bill 5121, this is the graduated reentry program. So this is a bill that says, well, let me back up a little bit. I'll give you the history. So previously, if you were in jail for certain offenses and you served 12 months in jail, then you could serve your final 6 months in home arrest, basically, right? It's a time to get you adjusted back into civilian life and, hopefully give you a successful reentry so that you're less likely to reoffend. So that's the way that it was. The bill that was originally introduced removed the 12-month period, so you didn't have to spend really any time in jail, and it removed the 6-month maximum. So really you could get sentenced and you could spend any amount of time in home detention according to the way the bill was originally written. So we worked a lot on that in committee and we pushed back a whole lot. And finally, the way that the bill came out in the very end is it created 2 tracks, one of them for nonviolent offenders. It said you would have to serve 4 months in jail and then you could serve your final 18 months in home detention. If you're a violent offender, you would have to serve 12 months in jail minimum, and then you could serve your final 5 months in home detention. There was a lot of negotiation that went to get it to that part. As a matter of fact, Representative Chambers mentioned the amendments. On that particular bill, we offered 17 sensible amendments during the floor debate. Guess how many were accepted? No, 1. We got 1. We had 1. The next thing is removing penalty for crime altogether. You've probably heard about the Blake decision from the Supreme Court. Do you remember that this year? So what this did, as this bill was originally written, is it legalized personal use amounts for various felony-level drugs, right? That was its original form, and of course, through negotiations and a lot of work, we were able to stop that from happening, but kind of. So the end result is possession of felony-level drugs is now a misdemeanor, and for your first 2 offenses, the prosecutor has to send you to diversion, and then for the 3rd offense, the 3rd time you get caught, they can either send you to diversion or charge you with a misdemeanor, right? That's not much. So on that particular bill, we introduced 57 amendments during the floor debate. And guess how many were accepted? 1. We got 1. We get 1 every now and then. We get 1. But so all in all, whenever you widen the aperture and you look at all of these laws that really prohibit and limit law enforcement from doing their job, because think about this, if you're a law enforcement officer and you know that the prosecutor is not going to prosecute the crime, how likely are you to do the arrest in the first place? How much is that going to affect your morale, right? So whenever you look at all of these laws and you see that they're limiting law enforcement's ability to do their job, they're not prosecuting crime, they're lessening the sentences, they're removing sentences, they're making it easier to be a criminal, you start to realize that there is a real spirit of lawlessness that is gripping our state. And we have got to turn course. We've got to turn course, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those specific ways here in a little bit. But you know, my father always said, what you allow today, you'll get more of tomorrow. We cannot allow this today, folks. We cannot allow it. Anyway, that was my job, and thank you very much.